And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880. I'm Pete Belcastro. This is Alice Lema here. We're both real estate brokers with John L. Scott in Southern Oregon. We get together with you once a week here on the radio and on YouTube to talk about our favorite subject, which is Southern Oregon real estate. And Happy New Year, by the way, our first show 2020.
Happy New Year, yep.
You had a good New Year
yes,
as well?
Yes, how could you not have a good New Year here in Southern Oregon?
Well, I'll tell you, if 2020 in the real estate market is anything like 2019 was, we're going to have a pretty good year again. It's going to be a big year.
Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting because the 2019 numbers are starting to come in. They're not exact, but I think we broke $5 billion.
Four or five?
Five.
Are you kidding
I think
me?
we might have broke $5 billion in real estate transactions in Southern Oregon.
Is that in the two counties? I'm hoping you're in the two counties there, but that's
it's
not
just that's Josephine.
Jackson and Josephine counties,
right? And that's 18,000 transactions.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, for our little town, is that something?
That's great. Amazing. That's pretty good here. Anyway, this person next to us here today is Kim Ramsay, and she's Vice President of Neilson Research Corporation. She's joined us here on the Real Estate Show today to talk about they're an environmental testing laboratory. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
All right, and I got here in a long time, and I remember driving by on, what is it, on 10th Street or 8th?
Yeah, it's on 10th.
On 10th Street,
yeah.
You saw that sign, Neilson Research Lab there. That was like in the 80s. It's been there for a long time. No, 90s?
Well, we moved over. We started on Bradbury Street.
Okay.
And then we went to Highland, and now we're on Grape Street. But we've been there since...
Long time.
1990,
long time. Well, it's been there a long time. Yeah,
maybe 89.
Yeah.
Well, and tell us how you started, because it's such a great story.
Yeah, so my dad owns a company, and he started in 1981, and I was all of 10. So we had it in our garage. And so my brother and I, he's 3 years older, we actually earned our allowance money washing laboratory glassware and making media and, not things that normal kids would be doing. We did our regular chores as well.
Think of how many businesses have started in someone's garage.
Yeah.
And still successful and a family-owned business.
Exactly.
That's...
Yeah.
We love that. I mean, that's what we all be entrepreneurship and do that. And of course, very, very successful. And you're both back doing it again. You're still there doing it.
Still there.
Yeah. Well,
just not in the garage, though.
No, you've changed out of the garage, which is really good.
Well, we depend on you so much as real estate agents, and our clients do too. So I'd love to hear some of the kinds of testing. I know water testing is really important, but there's a lot more to what you do than just water testing.
Yeah, we started out as a drinking water lab. So the Safe Drinking Water Act came out in 1974. So we opened the lab. My dad opened the lab in 1981 and started out as a drinking water lab. And then to grow, because businesses need to grow, we started working with wastewater and then soil. And now we do asbestos. We do some food. And we did wine for a little bit.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't a lucrative thing. So we switched out of that. And then now we're getting into Legionella. And we're testing Legionella in water.
Legionella is like Legionnaire's disease kind of thing?
Exactly.
Really?
That's our newest endeavor. We just got accredited by the CDC to do that as well.
Is that something that's found in our local water?
Actually, yeah. It's not in Medford water. Well, it can be. What happens is it's in water that's stagnant. But when we get some new instruments or start a new method, we just kind of do our own testing. So we had 10 employees that were on wells, because we have 24 employees at the lab. So 10 of them are on wells. I'm one of them. Mm-hmm. And so we brought our water in to test it just so we can run some blank tests, and found out that 3 of us have Legionella in our water.
Wow.
I'm one of them. I actually had the most. And my water runs a little warm. My well water does. And it had coliform bacteria as well.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. It was a bit of an eye-opener that I didn't want.
There are lots and lots of people. I mean, there are tens of thousands of wells that are all around us. And I've met people who've had the same well, lived in the same place for, 20, 30 years, never had them tested.
Right.
Right?
We get that every day.
Is that right?
We get people that come in and say, I've been drinking this water for 30 years and I'm not dead yet. Why should I test it now?
Okay, that's a good question.
And that's exactly how they put it.
Yeah.
And you find, I suppose, all sorts of things. Have you found some that have really been bad or they didn't even know this kind of thing?
Yeah. We had a couple that had their grandkids visiting. And one child came in from California and another 2 kids came in from France. And all 3 of the kids within a day, which obviously they couldn't contract anything.
They were getting sick?
They were vomiting.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so we said, oh, well, you should test the water. And they have a 500-foot well.
Wow,
And
Which is deep.
That's really
super
deep.
deep.
Yeah, that's
So
super
you
deep.
wouldn't think it would have bacteria, but sure enough, it had E. coli. And that's why everybody's getting sick. But the homeowners, the couple, they weren't getting sick at all. Why? Because you can build an immunity
build
to
an
it.
immunity
Just
to it.
like
know
Mexico.
that
Yeah.
you can build an immunity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's just
yeah.
like when we travel to Mexico, we know not to drink the water.
Right.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you see that kind of testing for water out of wells, and what's the advice? I mean, what should people do with that? Every 5 years, or when should I have my well tested? I mean, you think you're right. The other thing is, I'm going to put a filter on it. I'm going to be okay, right? I can put a filter on my tap, right, and I'm okay. Is that
You mean like from the hardware store?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I see
I'm on Amazon
I
even.
see people doing that. That doesn't really do it. It doesn't solve the problem or solve it, does it?
It depends on what the problem is,
Okay.
honestly. We recommend bacteria testing every year.
Every year
year.
for bacteria.
It's super common. City Medford tests their water. They test the water for our city. Actually, multiple samples a week we get in. Samples twice a week for the City of
from
Medford.
the city of Medford.
So if you can imagine, they're testing weekly, twice a week. The homeowner's only testing it once a year. That's not so bad.
I don't think homeowners are testing that often.
No, they're not.
I have a hard time getting them
No.
to do it every 5 years.
Well, we recommend chemistry every 5 years because that can change as well.
But what do you mean by chemistry?
So like a top 35 chemistry, it's going to give you the arsenic and the boron, the chlorides, the fluorides, hardness, iron, all kinds of stuff in there. That gives you an idea of kind of the background of your water, kind of the ingredient list of your water, where the bacteria is going to tell you whether or not the water's sanitary.
Okay, yeah.
You know, when you have city water, which I grew up on city water, at the house that had the garage.
Okay. You were
You
okay.
pay your bill, and you just assume your city's going to take care
You
of
don't
you.
think another thing of
Right,
it.
but-
I know that the Medford Water Commission will send out once a year their report. It
Yeah,
comes
it's
from you,
Consumer
obviously.
Confidence Report, yeah.
Yeah, it comes from you. Yeah. Okay.
So we don't do their report. We do their testing
Right.
for them. They do their own report.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when you pay your water bill, you're assuming you're going to get safe drinking water, and that's through the EPA Safe Drinking Water Act. And every city is required to do that. Every public water system is required to make sure that they're providing
Right.
public drinking water.
But
When
not
you
for your
have-
well. But not for
Exactly,
your
that's
well.
your
And-
responsibility.
That's really the difference. By the way, we're talking with Kim Ramsay from Neilson Research Corporation today here on the Real Estate Show about testing of we're talking about water testing right now. When you sell a house, okay, Alice, and you have a well, okay, what's the recommendation? What does someone have to do? What's the law say you have to do if you have a well on a house that you're buying?
Well, you don't, by law, have to do anything in Oregon until you're in contract, and then the seller just has a very small amount of testing that they're responsible for. But myself and a handful of other agents are now on the soapbox of we would like you to get your full battery of tests and your septic done before you list, and that you give that to the buyer as part of your due diligence.
So you're talking in your case, you're talking about like a pre-home inspection that you've talked
Yep,
about
yep,
so much.
and we
about
expanded
do
that
it for the
concept
seller,
to the water. Yep, if you're
you're-
selling.
You're bringing it over to
You
the
do your water
now and
and
saying
the
do
septic.
a pre-test in the water
Right.
yourself.
There's a handful of us that are doing that as disclosure and as marketing, and just so that as a seller,
Okay.
you're not shocked if something happens in the middle of escrow, because
That happens a lot.
it.
Okay,
yeah.
say that again. It happens a
It
lot.
happens a lot.
In the
yeah,
middle of escrow, it can be a deal breaker.
We
Okay.
hear it. We hear it probably once a month.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
If somebody, you've got this dream home and you love it and everything's right, but you forgot to test the water, and then the arsenic comes back, and I'm sorry, but I mean arsenic's kind of a scary thing, and there's a lot of arsenic in Jackson County.
There is, yes.
Jackson
There is.
County and Josephine County are on the hot list for the state of Oregon for arsenic and nitrate.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So we're definitely in their watch zone.
And the EPA standards are kind of low for those,
They are.
aren't they? Yeah.
are.
So you don't have to have very much for it to be a
For
a thing.
arsenic, nitrate's at 10 parts per million, which is pretty high, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we have those kind of things out there. When you say arsenic, okay? So these are strange words that scare people. I don't want to scare people out of this, but testing is really important.
Testing's very important.
From I'm hearing more and more, maybe because we're seeing more things in the air and it's come through our water now, and so we want to be able to know what we have. Correct? Is that kind of the bottom line?
Well, I mean, it's just your due diligence. If you're a parent, if you're a homeowner, you just want to make sure that you're providing safe drinking water to your family or to yourself.
Now, before we have a break coming up, if I want to take a sample, can I call you up and do it myself, or does someone, professional person, have to come and take a water sample from my well and things like that?
It's a great question, and the answer is it depends. If you're selling your home, you
Okay.
have to have a third party with knowledge of how to collect the sample, like a pump company. So they're the only ones that can collect the sample if you're on the sale of a home. And I agree with
Okay.
Alice to do it right in the very beginning. Do a full chemistry, and then you have a selling point. If your water's really good, then you have selling point. If your water's not good,
You guys make sense.
then you need to start working on treatment so that
Okay.
way
And you have
can-
time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You have time to fix it.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to have that last surprise. I agree with you totally on
Yeah.
that. Look at
But-
this. You're convincing me again of doing something like this. I've convinced on the pre-home inspection. You know that. But water, I've not thought of much of that. But if I had a well, I think you're right. That makes a whole lot of sense to market that property instead of being surprised by it.
Well, and if
I
you're
agree,
selling a
especially when you
home-
haven't looked at it.
Yeah.
Or the seller has no records.
Right.
That's the other
Well,
thing.
that
I've got
happens.
no records.
Yeah, I don't know.
I bet you see that a lot.
Well, yeah, we do. But back to your other question, though, the homeowner, once he owns the home, can come in anytime, he or
Okay.
she, anytime, and they can collect their own samples. We teach them how to do it. We have the bottles, and we give you a rundown on how to take your own samples. Because once you own that property, then you're pretty much in charge of your water.
Why is it so weird about taking water samples? Why is this? Why is it so have to be a third party? I mean,
Yeah, that's
it's
a great
water
question.
sample. I mean, it
Because
can't
it used
be
to
that
be
much, can
Yeah,
it?
we used to be able to do it.
So the Oregon administrative rule has always actually said that a third party has to collect the sample.
Okay.
It's just not been enforced. And so the thing is about that is you want somebody that doesn't have a vested interest. Somebody like the pump company, the seller and the seller's agent obviously have a very financial vested interest
Kind
as
of
well
like
as
the title company, the third
exactly
party, third
A
party,
neutral third party. Yeah, so
That's
the
why
real
they
estate
do
agents
it.
cannot do it anymore.
No,
Right.
no, you can't do that.
So
Well, I
they're
think that's
enforcing
okay.
it now, where before they weren't. And the people that are enforcing it are actually usually in title and lenders are the ones that are actually kicking it back. And then unfortunately, we get the homeowner that collected their own sample or the realtor, and then they have to do it over again.
They have
And
to
boy,
do it
when they come
over
into our
again.
office, they're not happy.
They're not happy with you.
Yeah.
Well, you have to pay for it all again, right?
They do, and
yeah,
they have to
'cause
wait
a different
again.
test. Yeah.
And you know, stuff costs money to have this stuff done. I know as well, because you want the report back, and you want it to be accurate.
Yep.
And you want to be able to trust it, and you want to be able to use it, as you say, in the selling process. So it all makes a whole lot of sense to me. Wow, that was just water. We're just talking about water sample. We've got to take a break coming up here, and we're gonna talk with Kim about kind of asbestos stuff and related other things other than water. 'Cause there's a lot more out there, right?
Well, there is, and we also want to touch on the irrigation testing packages because we have so many crop growers now
If
that
you-
are using those packages. It's very interesting.
How long have we talked about what hemp and cannabis have done, and you think it wouldn't have any, that Kim would not even have, we would not even talk about that with you, but yes, we are.
guess so.
That's what's so interesting about it. Anyway, all that ahead on the Real Estate Show. We got a break coming up. Don't forget, you can check out any of our past shows at realestateshowOregon.com. Happy New Year to you all. Pete and Alice, we're coming right back with more after this. Welcome back to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880 and on YouTube at realestateshowOregon.com. Pete Belcastro, Alice Lema with you today here on this first show of 2020. We've been talking with Kim Ramsay from Neilson Research Corporation today on the show. And Neilson Research Corporation, been around a long time, family business that does the testing, water testing. We've saw it in our first segment. Before we change on, if my well is you find and you do a test is contaminated, there are ways to mitigate that, correct?
Yep.
Not always, but there are ways, right?
Yeah. So for example, if it's coliform bacteria or E. coli, the first thing you want to do is figure out why, because that's not naturally, I mean, it is naturally occurring, but you don't want it in your water. So we'd like to try to have the homeowner figure out where it's coming from. And then if they can solve that problem, great. Sometimes it's casing, sometimes, casing of the well. Sometimes it's just maybe a holding tank that's contaminated. There's several different sources. Then there's chlorination. So you can actually chlorinate the well using bleach, not just like the Clorox. I mean, you can use Clorox, but it can't be like the scented kind or anything like that.
Now, do you guys do that?
No, but we provide instructions.
Okay, so you provide how to
They're
do
on our
those kind
website.
of things.
Yeah.
And what is the most common thing that you find in water here? You said, what is the most
Coliform.
common thing? It's coliform.
Coliform's everywhere. It's on our hands.
Yeah?
It's just not supposed to be in your water.
Shouldn't have it in the water.
And it's actually not even harmful. Coliform bacteria itself is not a harmful bacteria, but it's in the family of harmful bacteria.
Okay.
And so it's an indicator. It shows us that there's a sign that the well is contaminated. And then we look further to see if it's got E. coli, which is very harmful.
Okay.
But yeah, so your well should be free of coliform, and that's just your.
What's number 2?
We find a lot of arsenic.
Arsenic would
We
be
find
number
a
2.
lot of nitrate. Those are the 3 that are on the real estate rule because they're very common and very dangerous. Then we have actually a lot of boron in Southern Oregon, and boron is very toxic to plants.
But not to people necessarily, is
no,
it?
they're trying to link it to infertility. It hasn't been linked yet. That's like aluminum. They're trying to link that to Alzheimer's, but it hasn't been completed yet.
And what about lead testing? What about lead in
Lead
water here?
is not naturally occurring, so it's not in your well, but it comes from plumbing.
But you don't see. Do you see much of that?
We sure do.
Oh, you do see.
Yeah.
Do you see it
we
in
do
town or
see-
in wells?
You know, lead. It's just in the last few years that they stopped using lead, and so believe it or not, we find a lot in faucets that have brass because they used lead. I mean, it was a great product. It's pliable.
Yeah.
And so they used it a lot. It's kind of like asbestos. They used it a lot because it was a really good product. And so there's still lead pipes out there. There's still lead faucets. There's the brass faucets, and yeah, we still find.
And that's
lead.
a very affordable, quick test, isn't it? How long does that test take to get back?
It takes 5 days. It's
Yeah.
only $38, but it has to be collected as a first draw sample. So you take that sample after the water's been sitting in the pipes for 8 hours because we want to get the highest content that, say, little Johnny, your little guy's going to go and drink first thing in the morning. What's that child going to be exposed to? Because that's who we're concerned about are the children. Because they're most susceptible for
Yeah,
lead.
so a lot of us agents are starting to recommend when you buy a house in town that you go ahead and spend the $38 and have the inside faucet tested.
Especially on the older homes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the reason why that's a good. Alice is correct on that. Is that Kim? You've been doing this a long time, and so you've been seeing the changes in the testing that's been coming into you over the years. That is firsthand knowledge of what you're seeing out there.
Right.
So that's some really good advice, I think, for that in the water area. We could talk about water
I know.
just by itself.
And I never answered your question about treatment. It's definitely
Well, there's
available.
filters. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
filters for arsenic. I don't know what you do for nitrates.
You can use a reverse osmosis. The best thing to do is have the client contact their pump company. So each pump company puts their sticker on your pressure tank.
Right.
That's your company. That's the one you're gonna use because they know your system.
Right.
So call them, see if they can help you with treatment, and
Yeah,
give them
we
your
have some
report.
great pump
There's some
companies.
fabulous pump companies in our valley.
One of the first times I ever got involved with your company was when I started to remodel my house in Ashland, years ago, and I had a bunch of stuff I had to haul to the dump, and I went to the dump and they said, "Has this been tested for asbestos?" They wouldn't let me dump it, that kind of thing like that, and so I had to take some samples to you to do that. So. Besides water, you also test for asbestos-related items. And I bet you do a lot of asbestos testing.
We do so much
of it.
asbestos, and they're not our happy customers because they did exactly what you did.
Yeah,
they have a
they bring
truck
it in.
full of dirt, debris, and they have to come and see us, and they have to pay money, and they have to have a test done, and they want it immediately. And I mean, it takes us some time.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 days is the longest, but we can do it in the same hour. But of course, we have to charge for that.
That's pretty quick, though, 2 days for an asbestos test.
Yeah, it's a microscopic exam.
So what is the rules around that?
So our landfill will not accept any building material unless it's raw wood, carpet without the adhesive. Some of the fiberglass, like the glass fiberglass, like the yellow and the pink, they'll accept that. But other than that, even if you went to Lowe's and bought a piece of drywall and used just a corner piece and you have the rest of it, you still have to have it tested because they don't know if it has asbestos.
So it's mostly the drywall.
It's drywall. It's a lot of vinyl.
Flooring.
Vinyl flooring, roofing
vinyl
materials,
things like that.
Ceilings, the old ceilings.
Popcorn ceilings.
ceilings.
Yeah, it's
So you-
definitely got it in there.
I can imagine how much testing you must do with that. There must be a ton of it.
There's a lot, and it comes in a little Ziploc bag, and we have to analyze
Okay.
it.
Again, how much of that do you find? I mean,
Unfortunately, quite a bit.
you do.
Like I said, it was a really good product. It's fireproofing. So back in the day,
Everybody used it.
It was great. I mean, in fact, the nicer the home, the older
more
and
asbestos
the
it
more
was.
asbestos because the product was good.
Oh, that's
Oh,
a good.
dear.
Well, okay. So how do you handle that? What do you do with that?
Well, there's certain ages, like there's certain eras where it's possible that there's asbestos. So you just try to prepare people if they're looking to purchase or they have a home or any property that's in that era that there might be that. And again, be proactive and be in front of it because some of the asbestos abatement is $10,000 and $12,000
Yep.
or more. And sometimes it's not a big deal because it's just a little bit. And sometimes they have to tent the whole thing, and it gets to be very dramatic.
Is it mostly out of older homes, or do you see any asbestos after a certain time period?
50s, 60s, 70s, those are pretty
Those
much
are the big three.
Yeah.
So
I have a 70 built home, 1971, and we had it in our flooring and our ceiling, and it looked like an infectious disease containment. I mean, it was tented. It was pretty wild just to have it removed.
Well, that was the era then. You talked about eras. That was the era right after World War II. The baby boomers were just becoming kids and building tons and tons of houses all over the country. So we're probably not going to run out of those, which you have to test over the years, do you?
Yeah, no, I don't think they're going anywhere.
But
the newer homes and the track homes from the 70s, we are not finding that much asbestos because, again, it was a good product.
That's interesting to go. What other things do people bring into you and build? I mean, just to have tested. I'm just curious.
We get all kinds of stuff. We test. We do a lot of for the homeowner. We do a lot of just the water testing. But we'll have somebody comes in and said, my water doesn't smell right. My water doesn't look right. I've got something floating in my water.
That's a problem.
I think I do a sniff test about every other week. I'm on the counter sniffing water to see if I could figure out what to test for. Sulfur is really common here. And a lot of times with sulfur, we actually don't test for sulfur. It's a sniff test because our nose can actually detect it better than our equipment.
Really? Huh.
So, and we can add a little acid. So if you're a homeowner, you can take a little bit of vinegar and add it to your water. If it smells like sulfur, you've got it. You can treat it, you can aerate it. But most of the time, it's actually a hot water heater, the anode rod. If you can replace your anode rod, then the sulfur goes away.
Wow,
or
that's
sometimes just
great.
chlorinating. Yeah.
See?
What a good
And the
hack.
sniff tests are free. We do it
The
for
free sniff
if
test
I'm at the office.
at Neilson. Run, don't walk.
We just don't taste your water. We also have a lot of homeowners that'll come in and want to have their city water tested, and those are the California client. So the clients that come in from California automatically think that city water needs to be treated, and they'll put reverse osmosis units on it. And maybe that's the case for Southern California, but it's not for Southern Oregon. They chlorinate the water, but Medford actually has some of the best water in the country.
I have clients that come in, and when they sit there and they'll order water with lemon. Here, and I always tell them, I go, we have the best water in the world sitting right here, and they go, oh, well, I'm from South Carolina, and believe me, you don't want to taste the water here. They're so surprised by that.
Yeah, our water's pretty incredible.
We really do have wonderful water, but you also want to be, as you say, you want to be careful with it and to know about it. What about, do you also test, like Alice, there's a lot of coming up, in rural properties where you can't dump manure-related, materials back into streams. If you have places where you have had oil spills, if you have oil tanks, do you test soils at all for this type of thing or not?
Yeah, absolutely. So our lab is the largest accredited lab in the state of Oregon. So we're also accredited for the Safe Drinking Water Act, which we've been talking about. We're also accredited for the Clean Water Act, which is mandated by DEQ, and that's wastewater, stormwater. And lastly, we're accredited for the RCRA program, which is the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, which that soil falls under. That's mandated through the DEQ, but we do the testing for gasoline, diesel. We can do PCBs. You name it, we can test it. We're accredited for well over 1,000 different analytes.
Wow. So in Southern Oregon, it was very common for a long time to have an old gas station fuel tank buried or on the surface, and that's what people had
oil tanks.
Yeah, it's
right,
the UST program, underground storage tank.
Yeah, and they're still out there. We found one in town, in Central Point, in a subdivision. Yeah, but so let's talk about what you have to do when you find one of those.
So you need to call a contractor. Pump, Pipe, and Tank, Western States, a lot of those companies locally here can help you with that. They'll dig it out, and they know how to do the soil
dig it
temp.
out and move it
Yeah,
around.
There's several of them. I probably shouldn't be listing them all because I don't know them off the top of my head, but there's several in the phone book. And then, or the internet, I guess. We don't use phone books anymore. Might have dated myself a little. But anyhow, so call them and they'll go out and they'll remove it. There's a proper way to remove it. You just don't take it out yourself because you can make it worse.
But the testing was really interesting when we were watching because it was over a series of many weeks and many feet of soil that had to be removed and tested.
Yeah, and then once they get a clean test, then they can fill it back in. But I mean, we also get spills, and so if you have a tanker truck, like we had that recent one in White City, the Jet A fuel,
right? And
we were running a 24-hour clock, running samples, testing samples for gasoline and diesel and everything, just because of the fact that we had a road closed.
And where do those samples go? Who looks at them? I mean, does someone look at them and say it was bad or what?
Well, we prep them, so it's a soil. We have to turn it into a liquid, and then we put it on our instrument, and then so we analyze it, and then that data goes to the client, and then the DEQ oversees. In this case, the DEQ I believe was on site as well as the EPA.
Yeah.
And ODOT, and so they're all going through that data, trying to figure out what to do.
Do you monitor business discharges at all?
Absolutely.
Or I guess industrial
waste.
discharges.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about like septics and sewer things? Do you test those kind of things too?
Yeah.
Oh, do you get a lot of those?
Oh, what do you test for?
I bet you get a ton of those.
We have these employees that are brand new out of college, and they come to work for Neilson Research, and they're testing raw sewage, and I just don't think that's what their dream career was, but that's what we do.
That's where you start. It's down there. That's where you start. But you get that as well. I mean,
we do. We are accredited for that, the Clean Water Act, and we test. All the cities have waste permits because they're going to discharge that waste back into the river.
Right.
And so, what's funny is the waste permits and the wastewater permits for the cities are actually more stringent than drinking water. So that water that goes back into the river is super safe. Yeah. It's very clean.
It's a big thing for cities to not have a lot of pollution going back into their storm drains and treat the storm drain water differently.
Yeah.
Don't do it. You have overflows in the river. You have all sorts of things that go on, and that's where you come in.
And we have our fish. Our fish are very sensitive. There's a wastewater company up in Portland who actually reclaimed their wastewater and turned it into beer.
Did they really?
I'm a little nervous to drink it, but
that's so Portland. That's
it's kind
great.
of a thing. It's reclaiming water.
I want to see if they're going to drink that in Portland or not.
We should get a case down here and auction it off.
We got a break coming up.
Wow.
We got one more segment to go. Hey, we're having a great conversation with Kim Ramsay today from Neilson Research Corporation. We got one more segment to go, so you're going to hang around with us as well. Pete and Alice here. We're coming right back here to Real Estate Show on KCMX right after this. Welcome back to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880 and YouTube at realestateshoworegon.com. Pete Belcastro, Alice Lema with you today. Thanks for joining us here on our first show for 2020.
2020, roaring 20s.
Next week we'll have the stats out and we'll go over the yearly stats from 2019. I can't wait to see them. I'm looking forward to it. It was a big real estate year. I'll tell you that. A lot of sales and a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think 2020 is going to be big too.
We're going to see it. As long as those interest rates stay down where they are in that 4% range, people are going to continue to buy. It's a great place to live. We all know that. We've been talking with Kim Ramsay today. She's the vice president from Neilson Research Corporation. They're in Medford and Grants Pass, been around a long time, family business, test everything. My goodness. Now, you do not, again, in real estate, you will sign